Come with me to the US Book Show 2025. This is a super nerdy conference about the world of book publishing, and I'm going to tell you that the topic top of mind in so many of the panels was AI and the way it's going to impact the world of publishing. There's some clips from the different panels.
So, as mentioned, the Schomburg Center for Research and Black Culture is celebrating 100 years. The center is one of the most impactful institutions preserving and providing access to Black history and culture. It is marking its legacy with, among other things, an exhibition and a centennial festival. Joy, what does the 100th anniversary of the center mean to you personally?
If you do not know what the Schomburg Center for Research and Black Culture is, we are a research library, part of the New York Public Library System. We are located at 135th and Malcolm X Boulevard. We steward 11 million objects that reflect the history and culture of the global Black experience. I think that celebrating 100 years of this is important for a multitude of reasons. Namesake Arturo Schomburg, who was a bibliophile, a collector, a scholar, Puerto Rican descent, who really utilized these materials, rare books, manuscripts, artwork, which is part of a collecting ethos, to really signify, provide evidence that people of African descent had deep and rich history. It was not just part of this hemisphere, but it was global. We're also celebrating the legacy of men and women who, 1925, want people to put themselves in that moment. This nation is still legally segregated. And communities like Harlem, which develop as meccas for Black experience and Black culture, part of the Great Migration, Black migrants escaping the South, and coming to these northern cities, and then encountering and clashing with the racism that exists there. And then the impetus to create in spite of that is amazing to me. There's multitudes of things in the celebration, but really it is about that impetus to preserve and steward one's own heritage, rich with ways for us to understand the past, the present, in three-dimensional space. So even I am intimidated by that number, 11 million. And so how do you choose between Malcolm X and Maya Angelou, or James Baldwin, or Lorraine Hanscom? You don't. You put it all in. And so the exhibition, the themes of the exhibition are in the title. Collections are at the heart of what we do, the core of what we do. Community is representing where we are placed. It's a story about place, but it's also a story about a community of librarians and archivists who, again, make visible this material. And then it's about the creativity that can come out of communing with all of these objects and manuscripts and handwritten notes.
If you're ever in New York City and you get the chance to go visit the Schomburg Center in Harlem, I highly recommend it. They have a rotation of incredible exhibits right now. They have the 100-year anniversary exhibit. Previously, they had one I visited talking about the works of James Baldwin. It is such an amazing resource, and it is free and open to the public as part of the New York Public Library System, and it was wonderful to hear from the new director. Next, the CEOs of Simon & Schuster and Hachette speak on AI, book banning, and DEI.
At last year's book show, you rejected the idea of AI being the elephant in the room. Instead, you sort of colorfully characterized it as being more like the cicadas in the world, lots of buzzing and lots of screwing. He said that, you reported it. I'm wondering if you still feel that way, and also if at all how AI has found its way into the sort of day-to-day workflows at Simon & Schuster.
My fantasy is that we can actually use the AI to answer all the questions we're getting about AI. Obviously, it's impossible not to talk about it. I looked, and I think that the 5 or 6 major tech companies are investing tens of billions of dollars in AI. tens of billions of dollars, and none of them, except for NVIDIA, are making any money yet. But it's also worth remembering, and I remember when I was at Random House in the 1990s, and the CEO at the time, Peter Olson, he benignly noted that Amazon was gaining 1 point of market share every year. And that was in the 1990s, and that kept happening, and then it, obviously ascended. So I think that it would be naive and lazy and incurious not to be intensely interested in what's happening with AI. It's certainly not why I got into book publishing. I'm an editor at heart. I'm still the most excited about the books and the authors, and that's what I would prefer to be thinking about and talking about. But I also think it would be irresponsible not to be talking and thinking about AI. And I would love for David to expound on this more.
No, I think it's okay. Thank you, John. I mean, look, I've been in the business nearly 30 years. This is definitely the biggest development that could impact our business, I would say, that I've seen in that time. Anyone in this sort of position would be remiss not to feel concerned about it. And just to give an example, not from our industry, but I was talking to someone, a friend who's a professor at university, and she was saying that all of her students, without exception, use AI to do their essays. And some of them who are holding out now aren't doing it because their essays weren't getting such good grades as the people who were using AI. So I think something like that, to those of us, including myself, who didn't grow up with digital things, that there's something that feels quite concerning there. That said, I think like other people, we've seen some good stuff with metadata, AI filling in operational fields, stuff like that, that there seems some sort of benign things that can help us to get more authors' work to more readers. That seems like a good thing. But I think for all creative industries, there's this big thing about, the works being illegally ingested into AI, and then a big question about, whatever you want to call them, bad actors, anyone using AI to create. And I think there are substantial challenges, and I think there's substantial public affairs work that we are doing, the AAP, and will continue to do. So I think it's unavoidable, isn't it? It's the biggest question of all times.
Obviously, in terms of protecting our intellectual property, and I've been quite vocal about this, I think we have to be loud and insistent that the works that we create, that we put into the world digitally, should not be stolen by these AI companies for their platforms. And there are there are a lot of lawsuits going on, and I certainly hope that we will prevail, and that the creative communities that are waging these lawsuits will prevail.
If we're to take any positive out of this, I think it's brilliant how all the publishers have come together on this. So with the AAP, we're all, as you probably know, we're doing a lot of legal action on various book bans in various states. It's very expensive, I would say. By all coming together, we are making some wins. I hope we're making some progress. I think when you look at this as well, I think there's actually a small number of people driving some of this. I think it gets a lot of political traction. I think it's a sort of wedge issue, for want of a better word. I would like to think that the majority of people, when you really speak to them about it, are not in favour of book banning. Maybe that's too favourable about human nature. Certainly it's a concern, but as I was kind of going back to the previous point, we've seen lots of these things come and go in their time. There have been a lot of attempted book bans. There have been waves of this. I would like to feel that we would prevail. Kids in particular will have access to a wide range of books, but yeah, clearly it's concerning.
I think that the most important thing is to remember that in a democracy we have the power to organize, and we have the power to fight these book bans on a community level. I can't imagine there's a person in this room who isn't appalled by the tenor of conversation going on in this country right now surrounding book bans. The only thing to do, I think, that would really be persuasive in ending it is to organize on a community level.
DEI, another hot topic in the business, has been for a while. I'm curious what you're thinking around diversity, equity, and inclusion. How does that figure in your strategy and decision making whether on the lists, your publishing lists, or within organizations for instead?
I see it's a fairly simple issue in that, our mission at Hachette is to make it easy for everyone to discover new worlds of ideas, learning, entertainment, and opportunity, which kind of means selling more books to more people. That's what we're about. To sell more books to more people, you need to reach all communities, including communities traditionally underserved by the publishing industry. To serve those communities, you kind of need to be representative of the wider world. And also about 30% of the books that we sell published in the US are not sold in the US. We're serving a wide world of readers, a wide diversity of readers. So to do all that, it's really, it just makes sort of common sense in a way to be diverse at different levels of the organisation, so we can actually understand the readers that we're trying to serve. If we don't have diversity in our own organisations, then we're a monoculture. And if we're a monoculture, we can't serve a variety of cultures. So it all just makes good common sense to me. So in terms of our own strategy at Hachette, it's something that's very, very important to us, one of the pillars of our strategy. We know we're not diverse, 3 white men sitting on stage here. So we know all the ways that we're not diverse, and we're really looking at it and working on it, and trying to make sure that we are representative of the readers we serve. And it doesn't seem to me that it should be contentious.
I don't think I could do much better than that. I mean, the only thing I'll say is that we certainly are not going to back down on a commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Next, publishing veterans talk about passing the torch to the younger generation in the publishing industry and management style.
I want to ask the panelists today what one thing is that they wish someone had told them in their first year in the book business, and how they're working to offer that kind of support to the next generation of book publishers.
Hi everyone, and again, I'm Hania Konda over at Tenny Reparations Books. I think the advice I give to young people is mostly about finding a peer group. Like, you want to find mentors, but finding a peer group and outside of your company is something I kind of figured out on my own, and it made such a huge difference. The kind of learning that you get from a peer group is on a different level, and I think it contributes a lot to retention, frankly.
Hi, I'm Baby. I would tell people that conflict is okay. I feel like it's one of those things that we're not used to hearing, and that sometimes hearing no is a good thing, because I feel like a lot of people, when they hear no, they're like taken aback, and sometimes that's just the start of a conversation. It's not a challenge to you personally. It is the beginning of something where you're going to grow, you're going to learn, and you're going to figure something new out.
I think I would say don't forget why you got in business in the first place, because it is still extraordinarily exciting to get to work with people who are shaping the way we understand the world, who may be smarter than we are, and everyone in this room has access to them and some of their thinking. And remembering why you got in business in the first place is the best fuel I've had for my career.
There's a certain version of publishing where you feel when you start out that you need to sort of fit into, whether it's a certain role, editorial, marketing, whatever, that's the kind of person you should be, those are the interests you should have, the books you should be reading, etc. And I think that's probably a reflection of the time I started 30 years ago. But I would say, if I could talk to that Sally Kim back then, I would say don't work so hard to do that. Not that I did, but I would say that the pressure and the kind of the form was there, is to say what makes you unique, what makes your interests you. That's all part of what you do in your day-to-day job in publishing you, and that's why we're so lucky to do what we do. And I think that's something that I would have loved to have heard a little bit more, I think, when it was first starting out.
I would say it will get better. Our first year, we're a mom and pop press. We found out we got distribution and were pregnant on the same day. So that first year was a trial, to say the least. But it got better that second year. We got that really tough year out of the first year, and that was the learning on the mistakes. Just, we kind of had to just get through the obstacles the way, so to speak. So yeah, I would say it definitely gets better, but hang in there that first year.
I would say think outside the box. I started my career in publicity, and I think there's, particularly in book publishing, a kind of tried and true formula to making a book successful. And the way that, traditional publishing is siloed amongst different departments, people kind of stay in their lanes, but I think it's always helpful to kind of have ideas that are outside your typical job description, particularly now. There is a psychological term that's called genius mindset, is growth mindset. I think book publishing does genius mindset really well, which is basically following that formula, knowing what works and duplicating that. And I think particularly now it's more important to have a growth mindset and to come up with new ideas, and it's okay if they don't work.
How does the current retail landscape and how it's changed affect your strategies and the idea of the Midlist in general, do you think?
I mean, this is what leads to like 18-month campaigns. It's a blessing and a curse. Another blessing is you aren't stuck trying to cram everything in those first 6 weeks, and like if you don't sell those books that are in stores in the first 6 weeks, they get returned and you're done. You have a very, you have this really long runway to building a book up and giving it and making success for it. You just have to have a strategy every step along the way, which means a lot more work. That means making your team bigger, whether that's in-house or by bringing on outside help.
And that shelf space really isn't there. However, there's format growth. I think digital audio has been incredible for fiction. There's still growth happening in ebooks. So I think it goes back to the idea that you have to shift your metrics. You have to think a little bit differently about where growth is coming from. And so the retailer landscape, that is a very, very real thing. If an author is not going to have necessarily the same chance to quote unquote reinvent in paperback, maybe there's going to be longer tail growth with the audio, and then that's where they're going to pick up new readers.
A repeat author also has the benefit of hopefully their platform's been seeded, so you've really not only had some media for that author, their platform is growing, but the booksellers sort of know them and trust them and believe in them and want that third and fourth book and are going to give it shelf space in terms of the indies especially.
Yeah, and they're going to have good feelings about that author and not remember returning tons and tons of books. Like they're going to remember, oh, last time I ordered 6 copies, sold all 6, that was nice, and then we're going to have the author back.
And the older 7.
Yeah. But I will say, Target, it kind of broke my heart when Target made the little announcement saying, we've now cut our shelf space for fiction to like 1 foot per store, and now it's just all book talk. They're like, we're only doing book talk books from now on. But, the blessing has been we're not getting these books that are going out with these huge print numbers to all the Target stores and not selling through. I mean, Target knows what they sell. Target sells the book talk books well. It creates some other challenges with discoverability, but we were really like making careers in the mass merchandisers at the last few years we haven't been. Like no matter how much distribution you get in them, you're not really making a career just by having that physical brick and mortar presence. So I think it's okay. With smaller initial print runs, looking at other formats and being more strategic, but more realistic maybe.
How about the review landscape and the media coverage landscape? I mean, Publishers Weekly does a fantastic job, of course. But beyond that, and the loss of coverage in other places, traditional media, how has that affected, keeping an author engaged, helping them build their careers? Does that change your approach?
I can just say too, a partner mentality also carries over to how publicists and media are working, and even just the past couple of days, we've seen so many more layoffs with media. So
First for women.
Yeah, First for Women, Business Insider gone. It's tough. So in terms of seeding the partner mentality with authors, it does translate directly then to how we can showcase them to our media contacts. And a lot of that with the reviews, it is slim. It's hard to get in. Where we will often come in and complement for the traditional trade reviews would be to come in and really bring the opportunities that will elevate the voice of the author. So seeding for bigger podcast interviews, to have them recorded during the pre-order to come out a little closer to the launch. Podcasts are great because they're giving more attention to the book. It's very conversational. No, it's not a traditional book review, but it's a chance to really talk about the concepts and the story behind the story and what brought you to that certain publication. We are having to be pretty creative. Digital and online reviews are a lot bigger now. We do lean into the influencer space, but you can't just rely on the book review. It's just not there, more or less.
And it's not is as impactful, which is, I hate to say, but it's not. You know, like we've had authors who, you know, Time 100 Best of the Year, New York Times Review, great traditional media coverage, like 4 reviews on Amazon, and that book's not going to sell. You know, like it's like, so now, you know, whereas before we were spending 100% of our time in the publicity and PR side of things, chasing the reviews and the interviews, like now we're spending a large amount of our time trying to build those reader reviews, you know, like, and trying to just get those, it's all these silly little numbers, but they matter, get those numbers up.
Another part of that is those transparent conversations. We're still having transparent conversations with the authors about print and online being the same. You do encounter people in the industry, agents, authors say, I really want print in Vanity Fair. And we're like, online is the same. It's all the same. We all know that we're getting our news from our phones. So let's see it there. Let's see it. It's all even. Like, we'd love either one. It's fine. And sort of talking to them about, you know, I think I used to frame most campaigns thinking about the biggest media possible and thinking about what's the biggest media possible. Now I really think about what is the media where their readers are going to be, and sometimes that's building up the other way. Sometimes that's going to the niche community, which I used to say, I'm going to get that, so I want the biggest, and I'm going to get the niche, and now I'm like, I need the niche, that's the people that are going to buy it. And that's also digging into their communities often, but it's a shift in the way that I'm thinking, and I try to be really realistic with the whole team on that.
It's way better than getting them in Vanity Fair if only like 50 of the Vanity Fair readers are going to buy the book, you know, like it's, yeah.
It is true. We're also seeing podcasts and journals and quarterly Substacks that are a springboard now to more speaker opportunities and community opportunities for authors, because to your point, that's exactly where the key decision makers are getting their news.
This is the Book to Screen panel. We're going to be talking about a bunch of different things from some of the most intelligent and informed people in this space in both the publishing and the film industries. Tell me a little bit about what you do. Tell me about the life cycle of a book and kind of where you come into the process.
So I work at Ingram Content Group, where I run our digital and data businesses. Previously, Ingram would have come into the book to screen life cycle really more as an ancillary partner. So to the extent that books were optioned for screen, we would have been there to capture the demand through book distribution. But now that we have launched Media Scout, so now we're hoping to play a more central role in how books are selected and adapted for film.
My name is Mac Hawkins. I'm the founder and principal in Pragmatic. We're a scouting firm that helps producers, studios, and other creatives find books to adapt to the screen.
I'm Tom Ishizuka. I run the media rights team at Writers House, primarily focusing on film and TV rights, some stage rights.
Literary agents, we link arm in arm to basically help authors, writers, life rights, comic book creators meet their goals and dreams of getting things turned from page to screen, whether it's a long form feature film, streaming film, TV series, shorts, animated shorts, any kind of iteration. And basically our job is to help those authors and those writers find ways to have their written word turn into visual, audiovisual.
You all have a treat because I think you have just about the entire life cycle of a book up until the screen, and until then we get into production companies and studios. But this is a really good kind of look at what the publishing side is thinking about when they're thinking about adaptation. To that end, I think with things like TikTok and social media, the adaptation process is kind of becoming a lot more in the public eye. People, especially after Hunger Games, Twilight, you name it, everyone kind of knows about it. This is kind of some common misconceptions.
That authors cast.
Valid.
I think how linear the process is assumed to be when it's really not. You know, I think I've seen projects be, you know, rights purchased outright from the get-go and then fast-tracked to pre-production in a matter of 6 months. And I've also seen 10-year, 20-year-long labors of love where, you know, they've been developing it and submitting it and trying to find that right filmmaker for years, and then, you know, finally when that filmmaker kind of attaches, like all the dominoes kind of fall through. So how different it could be process to process, I'd say.
Yes. It's always fascinating, you know, we try to get material to clients as soon as possible, oftentimes secretly, so Mary doesn't know that
Not always helpful.
but we try to get material to them as early as possible so they can make a decision, but you know, we'll love a book, tell a client about it, and it may sit for 3 or 4 years until the machinations of the market come into play, and suddenly that book that we loved that there was no place for it has a place, and I don't know, a filmmaker picks it up in the airport, and then it becomes a thing.
What has surprised us, and I think what is surprising our publishers, is just the types of content that are of interest to studios and production companies. So, for example, there's been a lot of interest in nonfiction content for documentaries. We've had a lot of interest from the nonfiction side, and then through our Ingram Spark, through our self-publishing arm, there has been so much interest. I would say probably one of the main reasons that people are coming to the Media Scout platform is that interest in those undiscovered voices and self-published content. And I think there's maybe a misconception in the industry that self-published content, might not make it through the book to screening process. But I think we're going to see a lot more potentially optioned content through self-publishing.
I'm also a scout, so as a scout, I would say that we have a pretty good 360-degree view a lot of the time if we're doing our job right, which is not a lot of the time, but to that point, I guess, what are you seeing right now that's exciting you or concerning you?
I'm going to go with the concern. If you're a publisher, I'm going to hold your hand while I say it. You have to start taking risks. It's been, on the film and television side, we've had obviously COVID, which sort of supercharged the marketplace on top of the streaming wars, and then writer's strike, and now political, whatever is our political life as a country. And I think to a large degree, publishers have sort of retreated from taking big swings on particularly on big fiction, big narrative nonfiction, the sort of bread and butter of the things that we trade in. And it's much easier, I think, as a publisher to publish something that will, or you think will work because it's worked before. But the things that really turn into home runs rather than singles or doubles, both on the page and on the screen, are the things that are a little unexpected. And I think, after the sort of romantasy year or two of the last 2 years, this spring selling season on the publishing side, we finally saw some big upmarket commercial fiction moving, particularly heading into London, selling for 7 figures, and the sort of big things that used to be our bread and butter. The response from our clients has been that they all kind of feel the same. It's a flattening of culture that we all kind of feel on the screen. Feels a little like it's happening in publishing. Unfortunately, publishing is sort of staring down gaping maw of AI. And I think the best bulwark against that is to do things that a predictive technology cannot, which is lean into innovation, lean into new ideas, lean into diversity of thought, of race, of ethnicity, all of that. And come up with things that haven't been done before.
And I guess to that point, and please, anyone feel free to answer this one, how has the power balance shifted in recent years between publishing, literary agents, editors, film agents, book development agents, and Hollywood decision makers? How has that power balance shifted over the years, especially, obviously, in reference to the books?
I think it's harder than ever to, really have people acquire things clean and just one piece of IP. Maybe you need to package it up with a talent. Maybe you need to package it up with a writer. I think a lot of us, whether it's agents, whether it's scouts, whether it's, book and IP teams at these studios, I think we've had to do a lot more to put the pieces together so that when it's ultimately brought to a buyer, to a studio, it's a lot more of a finished package, which is hard.
I was trying to figure out what we wanted to talk about, and I noticed this trend on Edelweiss, which, okay, right, how many people here are booksellers? Can we get some hands? Woo! Okay, all right. How many people are in publishing? Whoa, hello. Agents? Agents? Yes, okay, media? All right, a little bit. So, and how many people have no idea what Edelweiss is? Okay, all right, so you're just gonna have to catch up. We have digital review copies on Edelweiss. We have since like 2011, I wanna say. And the numbers just keep going up year over year. And it's not explainable only by, number of new users or anything like that. It's very interesting to me as somebody who's been reading digitally for years and thought it had surely plateaued. But the answer is no. So I love this illustration. The ABA community, the American Booksellers Association community, is a great example. All of these folks are verified members. Like they know that they're ABA booksellers. We know that they're ABA booksellers. And look at the lines. The orange is how many booksellers are in the community. Goes up, respectably year over year, right? Not huge jumps, but growth. And then the blue is how many DRCs they're downloading. And it's just so interesting to me because we've been in this digital ecosystem for a long time. What is going on here? And I don't know the answer, so I asked these lovely people to help us figure it out. So here's some facts about who these people are who are downloading them from Edelweiss specifically. I know Rachel's like, gonna send me this sheet. I know. It's 19% booksellers, 20% librarians and academics, 12% industry, meaning like you people. 22% self-identified bloggers and reviewers, and then 27% are people who have not actually told us what their relationship to the industry is when they set up their account. So what does this mean for book marketing? Traditionally, the view of digital review copies on Edelweiss have been that they are a sales tool, right? You put them on Edelweiss for the booksellers, the reps use them, approve people, and there's also book marketing that happens. But they have been, to my mind, more of a sales tool than a marketing tool, and I do think that's starting to change. So Rachel, we're gonna start with you, because I know you live in there, and you are using them for marketing and publicity. So can you talk a little bit about how you do that?
Yes. Thanks, Jen. Hi, I'm Rachel. I run marketing at Catapult, Counterpoint, and Salesco Press. And I use Edelweiss every single day. I would say a little of other things, but for the most part, it's my main indie bookseller communication mechanism. And so what I love about it is I can get really nosy. So I know everyone who's downloaded, put all of our DRCs in Edelweiss, every frontlist title. And then I know every bookseller who's requested it, if they downloaded it, and I do a lot of follow-up too. What did you think? I'd love to hear what you think. I'd love to hear your quotes. And then I take their praise and I send it back out to other booksellers. Hey, did you hear what Sophia Powell had to say about this book? You better check it out. So, and I do some of that. Mostly I don't do that within the platform. I would love to talk about that. But mostly I sort of take it over to email. But I find it really valuable. I think in terms of people reading, this is a long answer.
No.
In terms of people reading DRCs who didn't used to, I don't know, something happened 5 years ago that was pretty hard on the industry. And also paper's really expensive. I have many complaints, but I do think more and more people have been willing to move into digital. And just the fact that I can be instead of being oh my God, this book is amazing, I'll send it to you. And then when it comes in the mail, you have to find it and remember that you cared about it. Being oh my God, this book is amazing, click here and start reading it. Just really, one of my main marketing principles is make it really easy for people to do the thing that you want them to do. And I find it really valuable that this is where they can start reading immediately, and then they can go just put in their order.
Yeah.
It's really easy for all of you. It's very generous of me. So that is why I use it so much.
Yeah, so you mentioned obviously COVID-19. We did see a jump, but I'm mentioning COVID-19. We did see a big jump in terms of both DRCs made available by publishers and then people downloading for obvious reasons. But it does continue to grow year after that. You think it's just people getting used to the digital platform more?
Yeah, I think so. Because once you start, if it works for you, it works for you. I used to say I would never read on a phone, and now I'm 45 and I can barely see, and I read in bed like this, with one eye closed and no glasses on, and ruin my eyesight. Because once you start doing it, then it's really accessible to you. And I think we work with lots of booksellers who would rather have paper if they can have it. But just the fact that anyone can start reading any book at any time from any of 3 to 4 screens in their lives is very accessible.
Yeah. So meanwhile, you're on the editorial side. You are also reviewing, producing content around books for BNN. Do you feel you were telling me earlier, you'll read anything in any form.
Yeah. And I'm usually saying things I'm the OMS, I'm the producer and have support over. But the thing is, I'm essentially a bookseller. So I am talking to booksellers in 547 stores pretty much every day.
And we're using DRMs, honestly, for talent development. We're using it, and when I say talent development, I mean booksellers in my stores too. I want to know who's finding the interesting stuff and the weird stuff. I ran the Discover Great New Writers program before we transitioned it to a title a month. I ran it in its old iteration and sort of needed to revamp the entire thing, but it became very stale. And no one was paying attention to it. And part of the way I did that is I brought in booksellers from the field. And we had this giant phone in the middle of a conference room table. And it was kind of like Charlie's Angels on the out. But I had voices yelling in from Florida and Texas and Wisconsin and all of these places where, I need a different point of view, right? Like, I need the babies weighing in and saying, oh no, are you kidding? That is so New York, we don't need that. And we were able to reinvent the program. I mean, for me personally, I spend a lot of time on airplanes. I get loaned out to other people's festivals. I'm happy to do all of it. But when you spend a lot of time on airplanes, like, you can't carry physical stuff all the time. I will say when I'm prepping for the show, especially some of the interviews I do, I end up with 130 pages of research, backgrounder, and I use maybe 10% of it. Paper is my preference if I'm doing like a big body of interview with someone. There are other interviews where I'm like, yep, okay, I've read the book, I'm good. It really just depends. I think anything that makes what we do more accessible to a wider variety of people is the only thing that matters. And I think everyone in this room, I don't care what you do with books, everyone in this room knows that discovery is the real challenge, and if my brother read the Keith Richards bio on his phone. I will read anything on my phone, but have you seen that thing? It is a beast. And and I think he read it in like 4 days. And I know he read every word of it because then he repeated almost every word of it. And I'm down with the Stones, but I do not need to know every detail of Keith Richards' life. But anything we can do, right? I mean, to me, you're in the same position, right? I mean, I realize maybe fewer stores, but you still need to be able to talk to all of your booksellers.
Yes, and as someone who started as a bookseller and moved into the marketing and event space, like DRCs, the access that they provide it's unmatched. I mean, when we are booking events like months out. We are already currently booked through the fall. If we are able to download a book that we are somewhat excited about and really see if it's something that we want to move forward with as far as pitching for an event or choosing it for our next subscription pick or just simply ordering up on copies and indexing it, writing a shop talk report, that's only going to happen if we have that immediate access to it.
$2.2 billion of audiobooks sold with 13% growth. Oh, the market is cooling. I am sure did that send a chill down your spine? Or how do you feel about those numbers? You feel that they're on the rise? Are we still excited about the audiobook market? And what's got you most excited about it?
I'm in my job because people are excited about the audiobook market. I have sort of an interesting background, and I feel like even just kind of in the green room, everyone talking about how collegial audiobooks have been, how everyone has been in the audiobook industry for years and years. I've been in the audiobook industry for 7 months. I came from the print traditional side. I ran a independent publishing company called Post Books. Before that, I worked in editorial and marketing at Warner Books back when it was Warner Books. My very first boss had a Rolodex. If you don't know what that is, you can Google it and then crumble into dust. But I came through the editorial and marketing ranks. But what I did was I focused on acquisitions and working with authors and finding talent and kind of looking for authors that were maybe under the radar or bubbling up under the surface or sort of getting ready to break out. So I think one thing audio has shown over the past, 5 to 10 years is that this is not just a kind of, a secondary format. We're not just publishing audiobooks of books that our publishers are doing. We're looking for authors who are going to break out in this format, that are doing things non-traditionally. And there are people listening to audiobooks that do not read in print or ebook. And it's hugely exciting for me because it opens up these incredible stories and writers that would not have been found otherwise. So to me, audiobooks are the same as traditional publishing because you're still looking for writers that are doing incredible things. So to me, it's hugely exciting, and I love it because it's the same, but it's different.
Jessica, you've been nodding your head through that
I love everything he's saying. I'm excited because more Black Press, I press with my agent and my partner, Regina Brooks, is that's exactly what we're doing with the authors that are press. And I came into publishing a different kind of way because I'm a poet and I make a living actually with my voice and speaking on microphones and speaking the things that I write into existence, into audiences. And I understood the power of audio, and I knew that that's been a big part of my 30-year career as a poet that's performed everywhere, that books are important. So I started a publishing house. I could have started a spoken word record label. And instead, I started publishing the poets of the roaring 90s out of New York City. The first poet was Saul Williams. So we weren't even doing audiobooks back then. You think I wouldn't have done Saul's audiobook, And so I didn't. But now we're backtracking, saying, oh, wait a minute. This is a real viable thing as an artist for me to have an audiobook. It's very different for me because I also fought for the spoken word Grammy to get away from, separate audiobook from performance artists, because when I am doing my audiobook, I'm also performing, but I'm not getting paid as a performer. So there's something that we need to work on. There's nuance to it. If you give if Blair Underwood is reading the book, you're gonna give him a big check. But if I'm reading my book, you're gonna try to, act like I'm just an author reading a book. And there is a big difference between an author that's doing a reading of their book, I've done both, and someone who's performing. So audio right now in Black and Brown communities in particular, it's 1:1 is the ratio of people who are buying print books are also buying the audio. And so in my community, from where the community that really loves my work, especially women too, they are really listening listening for books, listening for voices more than they are going into bookstores and buying them. Or about at the same level.
And Ed, you just asked, are we peaking? We've only just begun.
Okay.
And that's the great thing about audiobooks right now. 50% of the United States has still never listened to an audiobook.
Yeah, it was 51% had, and so it's 49%.
Okay, well, we'll take it. Thank you for fact checking me.
We didn't really do that. Just information,
It's okay, that means that we're improving.
135 million adults had listened to audiobooks this past year.
But I do think the work everyone is doing up here is exposing literature to different people who never picked up books before, and I think that's really important.
Well, you work in production side, so what has changed in the last? I don't even care about what's changed. What are we looking at next?
What are we looking at next? It's hard to say. I would tell you right now, currently, the thing that's really interesting and to us, you saw the commercial that Lee had up there, which is probably like my entire production budget for the year. But I think authors right now are as focused on audio as they are in print when they're starting, right? When we acquire a book 2 years in advance of publishing it, we're talking about audio. That's part of the conversation. When we published Bono's memoir, Surrender, we were sitting in the room talking about how special that audiobook can be. And I think that's only going to enhance the creativity of what we're actually acquiring in the future. And also just say, Audible's done a really great job with original audio. We've done quite a few original audiobooks, scripted audio, narrative audio. I think that's the future, more scripted audio.
Well, that Bono book is the type of book that is even better listened to than necessarily read, because he has the rights to that music. So he's got a lot of music in that book. There's a lot of lyrics that would have cost a fortune for anybody else. And source books, you guys have done some really cool stuff in audio. Maybe you can tell us a bit about that. Because source books have some really hot titles.
Well, thank you. So I think that just the growth of the market, it's also why I have my job. So Sourcebooks has been around for almost 40 years. All of our content was making it into audio. It was just going through outside audio publishers. So knowing that we wanted to really create a cohesive experience for our authors, they were like, we need to start doing this in-house. So that's what we've been launching for the past 6 months. It's going great. And like Dan was saying, audio is so front of mind for authors and agents and just for the overall experience that we want people to find our books in whatever format they want it in, and then also creating those really dynamic and comprehensive listening experiences. So I'm very excited for starting next year, going a little bit more into the kids list and a lot of traditionally illustrated content and how you can create an immersive listening experience there, and like really capturing young readers and making sure that they're not becoming lapsed readers who have to come back to it as adults that we're just carrying on with them.
Just if you don't mind unpacking that just a tiny bit, how do you make the visual experience into one that's auditory?
Oh man, so many pieces. I mean, audio really takes a village, and so I think that, it's working directly with the authors to begin to describe and script out what the images are, and then working, with sound engineers and with the directors, making sure that there's like the right pauses, creating a soundscape that is like indicative of what is happening, but not distracting, because I don't think people are necessarily looking for a movie that they're watching with their eyes closed. Like when you come to an audiobook, it's for a different experience.
And kids have a different type of imagination than adults, right? So you can play with that elasticity that they have and the lack of, say, reliance on factual, they're not as cynical.
Exactly, got to keep the imagination alive.
I mean, to be blunt. And Lee, you're in a unique position as both a retailer and a producer and a maker of extraordinary commercials. Often shown during sports events where my team loses. Thank you for that. Tell us a little bit more about what's the latest happening with Audible, because you're in a unique position, obviously, as the leading market retailer for.
Yeah, well, we're definitely seeing the growth that the APA reported. One interesting stat is that over the past 10 years, we've had our member base grow by 800%, which is kind of just mind-blowing. But we don't see it slowing down. 2024 was one of our best years. I think a lot of the things that this panel has already touched on, immersive sound design, kids listening, are things where we're going to see massive growth in the coming years. We're working on new productions of Harry Potter, and we've got images of them recording a steam engine for the Hogwarts Express. They went out on location and did a whole bunch of sound capture. And it's just so cool. And also it's going to keep my kids entertained in the car for a good 80-something hours. So looking forward to that.
And Ed, just to jump in, I know we're talking a lot about immersive audio because it's flashy and it's fun and it's very Hollywood, but oral storytelling is the ancient art of storytelling. It's the first form of storytelling. And let's not sleep on the fact that there's still single voice narrators that are kind of the bread and butter of this business that can tell really beautiful stories without music and sound design, etc.
Well, there's been a previous panelist at a previous event said to me, just because you can do it doesn't mean that the audience wants you to do it. There's certainly an audience for traditional, straight up, single narrator storytelling. I mean, I'm gonna just get this out of the way. One of the things we're seeing is disruption with AI. It's been the big subject. Speechify, for example, I can have Snoop Dogg read my email to me. And certainly we've seen a lot of talk about AI. Does anybody want to weigh in on this? And I'm going to start with our poets, because this is the one area, and I know Regina has said this several times, Regina Brooks, who's in the audience and is your partner in this, that AI does not do diverse voices. I'm
I don't know, AI can't write a good Jessica Care Moore poem. It's trying. And so, I am an artist I'm trying to not be afraid of AI. I was at the AI panel earlier. And for creatives, it is a scary space. And I think that what we have to do is just kind of get involved because AI is not going anywhere, unfortunately, even though there are some environmental things that are in question right now when it comes to AI and the space it's taking up to make these AI things keep going. I just think we have to get away from the fear. I don't really walk in fear in my life or in my art as well. And so finding ways to make AI work for me is the plan. It's like use it to add value to what I already do, but not to replace it.
Now, if anybody wants to weigh in on this, because one of the strategies is to use AI to essentially test the market. So if you start to see traction for books, say backlist that hasn't been able to that's too expensive to produce in natural voices and audio, to test AI voices, does anybody have a stand or a take on that particular approach?
I mean, I've always said, and I'm looking at Lee because he can talk about AI, I think, in great detail, given the announcement last week. But I think one of the things that has come up in my career over the last 6-7 years when AI companies have come to talk to us about AI voices, like, where were you guys 25 years ago when we were struggling to produce thousands of audiobooks in our backlist? And now there is no backlist. We've produced everything with a human voice, and frankly, I wouldn't want to replace that in the future.
I will say that, Audible itself is very much always going to hold in the highest regard human narration, and that is key to just about everything we do. But we do see use cases for AI that can be beneficial for all parties. You can take something from like search. We have an AI search that is called Maven that allows people to use natural language to say, oh, I'm going to be in the car for 8 hours with my kids and I need a book with a female protagonist that has a little bit of excitement and action to it. And the search will generate something that is actually of great interest that will be useful for being able to find that stuff that maybe wasn't as easy to find before. Of course, in our industry, the big hot topics are things like AI narration. And I think, look, some estimate that there's about 97% of titles in the world that don't have an audiobook. And for me, I think that's a shame. I think we should make those titles accessible to everyone, especially those who maybe use audio as their primary format for listening to audiobooks. And so one tool to do that would be AI. And so one thing that I've been excited about is the voice replica technology that we've released, which allows narrators to actually control and leverage the technology to create more content when they're not able to be in the studio 24/7. But they get to, say, 100% control over what they're creating and how it's used. And I think that's an example of a way we can both help authors get more content into audio, help narrators get more work.
I think there's also some really good examples recently of AI technology being leveraged, similar to what Lee is talking about.
For Melania's book?
No. We just published a book by Ely Callaway, who's built Callaway Golf. And he passed away over 20 years ago. And his son wanted to produce an audiobook after he passed away, a memoir in his voice. So he wrote this memoir. He had an actor record it and then generated Ely's voice from a lot of recordings that he had and overlaid it over the voice. And there's nothing like that. Being able to hear Ely Callaway tell his story 20 years after he's passed on, I think that's a really creative, interesting way of leveraging.
Well, that was the first thing I thought about with Audible's announcement, that what's the chance that we're going to hear an audio version of Hemingway doing Hemingway, or Eliot doing Eliot, or whomever we have, Churchill doing Churchill. I'm only thinking of male examples because that's what come to mind. And I apologize about that, but...
Yeah, I mean, I think it's going to be much more prevalent.
Maya Angelou doing Maya Angelou. She's still with us. Tony doing Tony.
So I would say, I work with a lot of authors who are coming from the independent or self-publishing hybrid spaces, and there's a huge concern in that community that a lot of these people came from non-traditional sides. They scratched and clawed and found leaderships and built leaderships, whether it's in print or ebooks. Sometimes they've done audio on their own. And there's an enormous concern that this foothold that they've gotten within the industry might be taken away by AI. I think there is an understanding that AI is not going anywhere. So to me, it's how do you strike this balance between respecting the artists, both in terms of the writers and the narrators too? Because one thing I'll say that I certainly know and they know too, is that a lot of these narrators come with fan bases of their own. We make announcements for narrators for audiobooks. They're huge. They're big sales and marketing tools for us. To the best of my knowledge, AI voices don't have fan bases just yet. So I don't think we want to, how do we balance respecting the authors and their works with understanding this technology is going to be here whether we like it or not? And like they said, there are so many books out there that could be used by other people to their benefits. Maybe it's for study usage. Maybe it's just people who have sight issues who need an audiobook and there's no other way to produce them. And so I think the trick is going to be, how do you balance respecting the art with finding a way to put these books into audio where they can be discovered by people who would have no other way to discover them? I don't think there's a definitive answer to it yet, but I think that's what everybody wants, is to respect the art, but use the technology in a way that's not going to harm these creator communities.
I was going to say, because I know Catherine, Sourcebooks has had a lot of success promoting narrators, and really almost to at the same level of some of the authors, because you have high volume listeners who are really invested in the success of their authors and subsequently the narrators. Maybe you could talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. We had a really fun test case recently, a book that came out a few weeks ago, The Conditions of Will by Jessa Hastings. The author had a very specific voice in her head. I think we sent her 200 samples and she was like, no, that's not it, that's not it. And she was like, do you know what? I have this huge platform. She put out a call and was like, anyone love my books that you think that you can embody this character? Send me a sample. And that's how we found our narrator. So I think that really leaning into these audiences and still being able to find new voices, even in like a really robust actor community, it's something to really consider. And just quickly going back to the AI thing, I think it's so important to separate out artificial voice from AI tools. Like I think that some of the tools to, improve QC, which just creates a better listening experience, it like opens up the people to do the creative work and kind of remove some of the manual pieces. And so that, at least for right now, is really how we're leaning into it.
Yeah, doing re-records and spot corrections and all of that is much more fluid with AI tools for sure. Can we talk? One of the other areas that we can talk about, and I'm curious, maybe if we and yourself can address this, is about cannibalization. There was always that concern that the growth for every book that was sold as audio was not a print book sold. I think since the relationship is so direct with Amazon, as a print retailer, how would you guys address this internally? Are there conversations about this? Is there a relationship with the other company?
Yeah, well, luckily I would say in recent years, like all my publishing partners who I work with, they understand that there really is no cannibalization. Something like 79% of people who listen to audiobooks also read ebooks or repeat books. So we think it's a very healthy overall industry where people who are listening more actually read more and they benefit each other. I'll also say for audio, as most of you probably know, a lot of audio listening happens while you simply could not be reading, driving a car, walking the dog, doing dishes, doing laundry. So I really do think they're very complementary formats in the overall health of the publishing industry.
You guys have a very cool commercial about a fellow vacuuming who's fighting demons. How about within Simon & Schuster? How does it feel over there about that?
Well, first of all, it's news to me that I shouldn't be reading a book while driving. I guess I'm gonna have to. No, I think, first of all, the growth of audio dovetails almost perfectly with sort of the contraction of the way that books are found in discovery. Book review sections have been gutted. The ways that books used to be covered have been slashed to the bone, and it's been up to, I guess, a lot of times readers and authors to find these communities because you can't depend on these traditional outlets anymore. And I think there are a lot of books and genres that are being discovered now that we're not getting kind of seen in traditional media and traditional marketing. And these are books that wouldn't have been in print, wouldn't have been in ebook traditionally anyway, and they're being discovered through audio. So I don't know if in terms of cannibalization, I can just say that there are genres that are enormously successful in audio that really did not have print or ebook components. So it's, to me, you're just exposing all these different stories and storytellers writing things that 10 years ago, they would have been selling copies of the trunk of their car. Audiences is in audiobooks. Problems create solutions, and I think that's the solution, people finding audiences because there isn't as much traditional way to get it out there.
But I think this is complicated to some extent. I'd be curious if anybody could answer this, because one of the companies that's not represented on the stage is Spotify. And Spotify has laid claim, for better or worse, to helping grow the market, particularly among young readers or young listeners. This is something that they say publicly. It's on the record over and over again. But if I search in my Spotify app and I pay for premium for All Fours by Miranda July, I'm going to get the book as an option to listen to, and I'll get my free 15 hours to listen. I can buy it, but I'm also going to get every single time she spoke about that book on a podcast. I'm going to get every commentary. So again, there's a sort of, I can discover the book, but I'm also going to be able to, discover everything else. And I'm picking fiction deliberately, because if I do nonfiction, for example, the new book on Apple in China, if I search for that book, I can pretty much listen to the author tell me everything that's already in that book on any number of podcasts. So does that create a distorted market where sometimes, for example, a Spotify as a platform can be drawing some attention both to the book but away from the book at the same time? Push-pull situation?
No, I can't stand Spotify. So I have to say that now. No independent artists. I mean, and I'm on Spotify.
That's fair enough.
They make a lot of money off people like me and don't give us the money. And so the publishing space where audiobooks may be different, but also as a recording artist, which I am that too. So you search my name in there, you're going to find it. I mean, I can have 1 billion listens on something. So I mean, we're talking about maybe it's doing something great for the market. I don't know if it's doing something great for the artist. I don't see any money from that. Pennies literally.
Yeah.
Please, that's nowhere.
How's that contract looking? I mean, they're coming up for renewal.
Well, I'm not getting involved in that.
Okay.
That's not. I make the books.
The Spotify contracts are coming up, I think, in October, right?
Listen, I think what I've noticed with Spotify is that people that I know that don't listen to books, but listen to tons of music on Spotify, all of a sudden started picking up books on Spotify that I produced 25 years ago. Like one of their better selling books was Kitchen Confidential by Anthony Bourdain. And we're sitting there scratching our heads like, who are buying this? Who are the people buying this book? And I think what it's doing is drawing a lot of attention to audiobooks from people who never would have picked up an audiobook before. And I think that's good for everyone. I think there's a lot of people that would have gone to Spotify and listened to the Beastie Boys audiobook because it's such a unique experience, and then went and picked up this beautifully designed coffee table book. And I think that's good. That lifts all boats for publishing, for authors across the board.
In the acquisition process for publishing, where does audio, rank on the table? Are there instances where we're looking at it as the #1 option over print? Yeah. I mean, I know that that's increasingly the case because obviously we're seeing paperbacks still under debate. The price of hardcovers has gotten to be astronomical for many people, let's be honest. I don't think that's unfair. Inflation is inflation. But where does audio fit? Because audio is often seen where before it was a library format, and if you were a consumer, it was a very expensive format on cassette or CD, and now it's equally priced to typically an ebook.
I think it's just created kind of a more holistic view earlier on, and it's not a really like one-size-fits-all model, like also within the APA stats, which I haven't had a chance to read all the way through, and I don't want to be fact-checked in front of this great crowd. So I don't know the exact proportions, but kind of what people listen to and where audio has a higher, listenership than people reading with their eyes, like it's so dependent on the book. So I think it's very front of mind for acquisitions, and it certainly runs the finance teams through their paces as they try and, predict forward. But I think it's just great because ultimately we just want people coming to our books and sort of however they come to them. In that way, I'm very format agnostic. Like if someone's choosing to spend their free time on one of your books, you can read, you can listen, you can do everything in between and both. And I feel like that's kind of the victory in and of itself.
Well, if I can just jump in, I know for sure for me and Regina and More Black Press, Harper, Amistad is a requirement. So our authors that we're publishing, Brad Walron's Everywhere Alien, we have Barbara Fant, a wonderful poet out of Columbus, Ohio, coming out in the fall. Like these are poets who read very well on the microphones, and they believe in audience, and we're living for those kind of writers and poets. So we're a press that's looking for people who are.
You want multi-talent. We want
like little baby bees all over the place. Yeah. So like people who like record, who work with full bands, interdisciplinary, put visuals on top of it, who work with rock and roll. Maybe you were a jazz poet. Yeah, we want all that.
But that definitely goes to the way being authorship is itself changing. I mean, before we were like, now you need to be on social media, you need to be able to do some of these things for yourself. And truly, you need to be able to be a talker. Whether it's an audiobook, but it's going to be a podcast, that it may be video. Does anybody have a thought on that?
I'm just going to say, Jason Reynolds, we just finished a very immersive audio thing, and a few years ago we were doing a speaking engagement in a library, and I remember him saying that he was a reluctant reader growing up, and the idea that a kid can pick up an audiobook and that can bloom this kind of love for reading and storytelling is really important. Like, as Catherine said, giving consumers and kids access to our titles in any way they want to read them or listen to them is really important. And I think audiobooks are helping to grow a whole new generation of readers.
Yodo has had a huge, has had a really cool thing going with their device, and kids collect them. They can trade the cards. And
Tony boxes and Yotos. One of the biggest challenges in our industry has always been like, where does children's audio fit? It's really hard to merchandise that, to sell that. You can't. It's hard to find it. And by the way, parents have to buy it for their kids. These boxes are really helping bring along a whole new generation of readers.
Lee, how do you merchandise children's audio?
Well, I would say kids is really an up-and-coming area. In Q4, we launched Kids Profiles, and we had 22% growth in kids listening in just that period. So it was very exciting, and I think it really is a great way to introduce young readers and listeners to a whole entire new world and format. And I think the expansion of offerings is really playing a role in that. And what I mean is, before we were very much credit-based, and so people would have to spend their $14.95 credit on a title, and often a kid's title, which is much shorter, they maybe wouldn't want to do that. But now we have all these different models, whether it's all you can listen, cash purchasing, or what have you. It provides a much more easy opportunity for parents to say, you know what, I'm going to get my kids involved in their audible listening.
I think animation is a big part of children's. I have my children's books coming out on June 24th. Your Crown Shines, go get it. But I had my son produce music for the audiobook. My son is 18, shout out to King. And I actually had a friend of mine animate the pages. Dare Coulter beautifully, illustrated the book. And I'm working with Dare to try to convince her to allow me to animate the entire book. Because in the tour I'm doing, I feel like I'm Pippi Longstocking or Mother Goose or some shit, but I cannot wait to get in front of kids. But I'm producing my children's event, like multimedia shows with a DJ, with balloons, with stickers. They're gonna make crowns. There's gonna be craft workshops. So like all the things.
Can I get a ticket to this?
Yes, I'm coming to Jersey. Absolutely.
There's something less intimidating too about audio, right? If you handed your kid a book, it's like for better or worse, it feels like an obligation. You put a pair of headphones, the coolest headphones you can possibly get them, hopefully, not earbuds, with headphones. There's something that's kind of hip about that, or am I wrong?
No, you're right. I mean, and then you have to think about
Big can.
Communities that don't have libraries. Like this is a real thing. You've traveled. There's spaces you go into. I've been in schools that don't really have a great library at school. There's communities that kids are not even culturally taught about going to a library and taught about the importance of book sharing and community sharing. So audio is a beautiful way to make
radio is how communities that didn't have access to schools were educated, both in the U.S. and around the world.
I mean, it's great for families too. I have an 8-year-old and a 6-year-old, and you can only listen to Taylor Swift so many times in the car before you put on an audiobook. But my kids really respond to that, and maybe they don't have the attention span that they will in a few years, but it really does, for parents, give you other options to kind of keep your kids entertained without just the same songs on repeat and being glued to their iPad. And as a reader, as a reader first and foremost, it's the greatest thing in the world to be able to experience that with your kids.
Those are memories you're creating, right? I remember, I don't know if people know Cracker Barrel, which used to be as a restaurant chain in the South, and you used to be able to, you would go from one Cracker Barrel and you could rent an audiobook and you could return it at the Cracker Barrel down the road. I mean, it's a very strange, sorry, I'm from Texas, so. What's that?
About getting back in time.
I know. Well, we could talk about the very first audio player from audible.com. But, okay, we're not going back in time. I mean, what other platforms to consume audio are we going to see? Because we're starting to see a lot of wearable devices. We're starting to see, like we said, Yodos. And I'm curious, is there any innovation there? Because I think if you said Yodo was going to be a going concern 5 years ago, I saw it and I thought, that's dead in the water, and I was dead wrong. What are you guys seeing? I mean, are you seeing anybody coming
something that we're doing is
anybody coming through the door with something crazy?
Something crazy.
I want to hear about it.
Yeah, vinyl records. And so we're going to be doing limited edition vinyl with all of our poets. That's something I think that's interesting and cool. Vinyl is back, and I've had CDs and I've had vinyl. My vinyl always sold better than my CDs, and everyone's digital is pretty much free if you have a platform like iTunes or whatever. But vinyl is a specific kind of market, and so is poetry, and so we think they go hand in hand.
I mean, I would say like just even on the print side, the explosion that ties in the way you're saying of special edition books with the sprayed edges and the stenciled edges. I mean, people want to celebrate their stories. So like, just even if it costs a little, when people are willing to pay premium prices to have that tangible object. So I mean, I love that, and to me, it's one-to-one with like these special edition hardcovers. People want to celebrate their stories with this kind of like cool momentum.
Yeah, we just released a soundtrack by Jason Reynolds. Came out today, 6:30. It's a million. But we actually sent out some influencer boxes, and within those boxes was a vinyl with a couple of chapters from the book. So yeah, vinyl is back. I also think there's really interesting picture books that have devices in them so that a kid can listen and flip pages at the same time. Kind of going back to the old school, listen to the record and beep, turn the page.
What's old is new.
What's old is new. I think it's a great way for kids to listen.
Yeah, I mean, I think the speaker boxes are just incredible because it's also a way to like get away from that screen fatigue in a way that all of us are feeling, and I don't think it's any, surprise that kids are feeling it too. So those are amazing, and I think again, it's so specific to the book and just leaning into like what that fandom or what that audience, like what are their other interests and finding those crossover moments and like what's important and special to them. So like for those influencer boxes, for those like special elite experiences, like in my former life at Pure H Audio, we would go to Comic-Con every year, and so we figured out a way to create like a complimentary special edition of the audio that like came in this box and it was on a USB and there was a Thrawn on there for any Star Wars fans. Big project, but I think just kind of finding those special ways to connect with people and have them connect with the content is just a fun project for all of us.
Also, just to throw out there is, I don't know if anyone's ever seen playaways, which are very cool little devices. If you're in an airport and you need to scoop an audiobook really quickly, they're just a little device that has a full audiobook on it. You can just pop some headphones into it and take it anywhere you want. It's a great way to listen to an audio if you're desperate.
We're seeing a big expansion of the market. And for the market leader, where are we going?
I mean, I can imagine that there are going to be not only maybe advancements in the devices, but also just the way we interact with the books. So I think that there's a lot of possibilities there. I mean, I look back and, we have the Whisper Synchro voice technology, which allows you to experience both the ebook and audiobook together. But I think there's a whole bunch of other ideas that are being worked on that I think we're really working with our creative partners, with our publishers and our authors, like how can we help immerse our customers more in the worlds that they are creating.
What differentiates TikTok from other social platforms like Instagram or YouTube?
I run the central advertising team there, and I'm also running the social commerce. And for me, I feel like the main things that are differentiating TikTok in the space are that readers are traditionally looking for really authentic conversational content, and TikTok has taken that kind of content and served it to people rather than having them self-select into it. I think that traditionally a lot of that was found on places like blogs or forums where people needed to be actively searching out book content in order to find it, and the TikTok algorithm is serving it to people organically in their feed, which is not only creating a really engaged audience, but it's also reigniting a lot of people's love of reading in a way that we haven't seen with other major media platforms.
That was a great answer. Never ended that one. So I come from a different perspective. I'm Smitty, I'm a content creator. I started my TikTok in August of 2023. And I think the thing that separates TikTok from every other platform is just a community. I'm not sure if you all, who here has TikTok? Raise your hand. Yeah, I'm sure you feel that community feel, in terms of you follow your favorite followers and you feel part of their community. And I think that's what separates it. Also, you can start a TikTok tomorrow and post a video, and all of a sudden the video has 2,000 views. And if you think about 2,000 people, that's a lot of people caring about you talking about books. And I think the way TikTok's algorithm works, one person talks about this book, and another person talks about this book, and then you have a snowball effect. For me, it's been really fun to build communities and see, other creators who may not have, or may not have been like me in terms of never talked about books in their past, because again, I'll be honest with you, not many of my friends talk about books, and to be able to go online in communities to talk about it, TikTok has paved the way and continues to pave that way in terms of making sure that you don't have to be a scholar or librarian. You can just sit in front of your camera and talk about books, and TikTok will reward you. So
I'm Michael. I lead the books and entertainment business at TikTok Shop. What else is there to add on? I think really TikTok, it comes down to those two parts, right? Authentic content, the authenticity of the content, creators that are really talking passionately about something that they have interest in, believe in, and then community. And TikTok, of course, recommends content to you based upon personalization, based upon what you're scrolling through in your For You page. So the more that you use TikTok, the more that the content is tailored to you. So we have all of these passionate communities for all types of hobbies, interests, passions, right? And TikTok is always learning about you so that it can feed you what is most relevant to you. Book Talk is one of the biggest communities and most engaged communities on TikTok. And I'm sure everyone here is aware of how much Book Talk has really impacted sort of publishing industry and setting trends and tastes for readers. As of April, just this year, we have over 53 million #BookTalk posts on TikTok, which gives you a sense of how much it's grown in the last 5 years, how big the community and how engaged it is. TikTok Shop, what we're trying to do is we're trying to harness the power of all of that content and creators and match it with readers so that they can get personalized recommendations to find what their next book that they want to read is, and then be able to purchase that directly on the app. And as of 2024, I think last year we've had over 59 million book sales, at least 59 million book sales that are coming from #BookTalk content and creators.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I think when we're talking about TikTok now, we're increasingly talking about Book Talk, which is like the organic side, and then we're also talking about TikTok Shop, which feels like an entirely separate thing. So Charlotte, what was the learning curve for growing your TikTok Shop, and what has worked well for you on TikTok Shop?
Yeah, well, at Hachette, we started the process of setting up our TikTok Shop in August of 2024. We launched our TikTok Shop in November of 2024, which is a pretty tight turnaround. I think that for us, the largest learning curve, or the thing that I would tell myself in August 2024 to prepare for, would be to make sure that all of our operations are in line for a really flexible business model. And the reason for that is because the TikTok Shop is applying commerce to entertainment in a way that others haven't yet. And it's led to really unpredictable book sales for us, which is fantastic, but also difficult and challenging for a supply chain. One example is that only a month and a half ago or so, we found a book that published in 1995. It's called How to Build Small Barns and Outbuildings. It sold through 5 years worth of inventory in a matter of days, just through one affiliate post on TikTok Shop. That's really exciting. It's also really daunting to fit a traditional publishing model into that kind of a fast-moving platform. And I think the more that you can do ahead of time to scale to that level, to be able to respond to that kind of consumer engagement is really important for success there.
And Michael, from the TikTok side, do you have any tips for publishers looking to grow their TikTok presence?
I think, first of all, it's very difficult. It's not easy what Charlotte and team were able to do, onboarding up to TikTok Shop in just 2 months, getting ready for Q4 and launching. And I think that what we as a platform do, we work with sellers of all different sizes. So we work with big 5 publishers, we work with indie imprints, retailers, small first-time authors that are publishing, with print-on-demand services. So we work with all different types of sellers, and we have success cases working with all of them, different strategies. If I were to kind of like synthesize and focus on the key that connects all of it, it's content on TikTok drives discovery, drives consideration, it drives purchase, and that's how you build people that are paying attention to your brand and the books that you have. So there's all different types of content strategies, but that's the core of any publisher that wants to sort of scale on TikTok, right? Whether it's working with an in-house team and you have your own content creation capabilities, or with our affiliate network, collaborating with the top creators on TikTok, or with agencies, and we have tools to help each of those different models. Creating a robust kind of content strategy is the key to sort of like creating short videos and impressions, and that's what drives growth in terms of sales on TikTok.
So talking about working with creators, Smitty, how do you decide what books to read and feature in your content, and how can publishers help make it easier for you to discover new reads?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think when I first started out, it was really just me going to the library and like browsing the shelves and trying to figure stuff out. But now it's like going to some of my favorite creators, like literally going and typing in BookTalk and just seeing like what's going on there. But also seeing the posts that have like minimum likes and like seeing what this book's about, because at the end of the day, it's like once a book is huge, like you have your different opinions with that. That's what I do. I have my favorite creators that I go to and I look for them. I think from a publishing standpoint, I think, you know, you just hit on the head, like working with different creators. I would challenge publishing to not only look at bigger creators like myself, but like some of the smaller creators out there, like again, 1,000, 2,000, 3,000. Like I was in that shoes one time and I had one of the most engaged communities. And some of those people are like some of my favorite like people who I follow, because again, they're doing it for the love of the game. Like they're literally posting and maybe their views gets like 500, 600, but the books that they're giving you are amazing and they really care about it and they want to grow from there. So when it comes to publishing, like don't just target the bigger creators, like definitely target smaller creators, because you'll probably see a lot more, you know, dividends from that there.
I'd just add, you know, for our shops, exactly to what you were saying, some of the creators that see like the largest conversion rate, the most amount of their audience actually buying the books they recommend, have like less than 50,000 followers. They're all really small, but they're really passionate, and it's been really effective for us for selling. I think that's definitely a huge part of the strategy.
Yeah, and I just want to, like, I think it's perfectly what you just said, Smitty. Because TikTok is all of these different communities, right? It's not just about working with the biggest creators to get that impression. It's about each of these creators has cultivated their own following, their own fan base, their communities, right? And these are people who view the videos and trust their opinions and their recommendations. And so working with a broad and diverse range of creators is one of the best tactics for sort of growing on the TikTok shop. I have one example that I kind of want to share. There's one independent print who we've seen breakout success with. They're called The Lost Skills. They're based in Romania, and they are very focused on a sort of specialized subset of like herbal medicine, survival skills, self-sufficiency, and they have like a limited, you know, title list. But they've been able to find tremendous success on TikTok because they have a very targeted affiliate strategy. So they have built their own community of creators that they've worked with across multiple title releases. When they are releasing a new book, they send out thousands of samples to their top creators, right, on BookTok, and we help them also curate that list. They have higher commission plans to encourage these creators to create high quality, you know, shoppable content. And then they also make sure that they have ample inventory so that when these short videos start generating views, people start converting, we don't lose momentum from any out of stock issues or logistics or anything like that. And so with all of these pieces in place, it's hard to tell when something's going to go viral, right? But there's a lot of operational things that we can do to try and capture the momentum when things start taking off. And The Lost Skills has now sold over 1 million copies on TikTok Shop, which I think is really, really amazing.
Something that Smitty and Michael are keying into that we've seen at Hachette too, that I just want to mention, is that we found that a lot of times we're not necessarily, at least for the shop, selling to BookTok people or to readers. We're selling to e-commerce creators who are engaging with books, not books creators engaging with e-commerce. And because of that, we're keying into these audiences of people who just want to learn. They're not looking to read, they're looking to learn. And one of our missions as a company overall is really just to make it easier for people to learn and to discover these like new audiences. And TikTok has made it really easy for us with the shops to key into these really, really small audiences of people who like shear sheep. And they need a book on how to do that the right way. And we have it, and we're able to match that with them in a way, like at a scale that just wasn't really replicable in traditional influencer outreach. Like those people are finding our books and asking us if they can make videos, and we work really closely with them after that.
And from your side, how do you find these creators to partner with?
Yeah, I mean, Michael might be able to talk a little bit more about the tools on TikTok Shop than me, but honestly, a lot of it's self-selected with these creators. Like Smitty said, they're smaller, they have less followings, and they reach out to us and say, I'm really passionate about knitting a sweater, and you have a great book about knitting sweaters. Will you send it to me and I'll share it with my audience and people who love to knit sweaters? And we do, and that's kind of how they come about. There's the flip side, but where you look at people who have engaged followings who are selling a lot, and you can reach out to them too. But for us, a lot of the success has been people telling us that they're really passionate about this thing and kind of taking a chance on smaller creators with engaged followings.